can only spend so much time trying to learn stuff. When you're trying to get a product to market, that you need to make decisions fast. If you get caught up on every little decision, you're gonna end up spending a year on something that should take 3 months. You're trying to get customers, not build a perfect product.
Angus Keatinge, co-founder and co-CEO of Quickli, a company that's revolutionized the mortgage broking industry, serving over 10,000 mortgage brokers and representing more than 50% of the Australian market.
I think when you take on external money, you're inviting a lot of kind of risk.
How do you realize that you were the bottleneck?
You are the bottleneck when there are...
Angus Keatinge, welcome to The House Story.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Mate, we always start here at The House Story with going back to school. So why don't you kick us off and take me back to Angus as a kid?
Yeah, Angus as a kid. That's a funny question. I don't think about me as a kid very often. Look, I had 3 older brothers growing up and was very close with them. We used to fight a lot. In school, I was always, in primary school, I was always good at maths. I was fairly shy. I guess another thing maybe worth mentioning is like when I was a kid, I was always deeply, deeply interested in how things work. I'd be driving along in the car thinking about how does the clutch work? Like what's really going on down there? Or I'd be, looking at the gears or, I'd be, you know what I mean? So I was always like trying to understand like what's happening on the inside. Like how can I understand this world like of things that I can experience but can't see? I grew up in this great town up in Newcastle called Stockton, which was, just a phenomenal small town to grow up in where it's a peninsula. So there's one road in, there's one road out and, it's a flat town. You got the beach there, you got the river on one side and all your mates are in skating or walking distance, right?
Nice.
So we used to skate together, surf together, play footy together, cricket together and, cause just general mayhem together. So when I was a kid, I was on the farm up near Coffs and then moved to Newcastle, starting high school. And yeah, that was just a fantastic town to grow up in.
And then finishing school, what did you do? Did you go to uni?
Yeah, look, I did. I studied electrical engineering. I did this work experience and someone said to me, he said, hey, if you want to make a couple $100,000 a year, sitting in a room doing maths, study electrical engineering. And I was like,
okay,
that sounds phenomenal. I love that. Let's go. It was like the one, I found peace in doing maths and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And so I always like having this, career prospect for me. I thought about all kinds of things, but having this career prospect that was like, you can do this thing that you love that kind of pulls together your, academic interest in maths with your curiosity in the world around you. And that be a successful career. So that's what drove me into doing electrical engineering. So I moved to Sydney, studied electrical engineering, and yeah, this is where the story becomes a little bit less about me and my academic interests and me and my life. So I met my beautiful wife Renee. We're actually not married. We're probably never going to get married, but I call her my life because I love her to death. And
why is that?
Look, I don't know. You know what? One time I was telling someone about, I'd like to get married, but I don't want all the drama of a wedding. And, we've got kids and, I don't want to do that. And this person said to me, why don't you just buy a ring and wear it? And that's going to do for you 90% of what it means to a man to be married. You wear a ring, you're basically married as a man. That's what matters. And I did that. I was telling my mum gave me this ring. Like my dad had stopped wearing it. So, she just gave it to me. And honestly, that was, ever since I started wearing that ring, I was like, yep, all right, married man. So Renee and I think I was 21 at the time. And, we got pregnant with our first kid and we were like, let's do this. I came from a family of 4 boys. I always wanted a big family. She always wanted a big family. And we're like, all right, pretty early days. I don't have a job. I'm still studying, but let's do this. And, luckily, her parents were able to help out and kind of support us a bit. So we did that, worked out, had baby number 2. At that point, I got a job. I was working at a startup called Propeller in Surrey Hills. They do, software and some hardware for drones in construction. So they're pretty cool mob. So I started at Propeller when I graduated and that was going really well. It was funny that I remember in the interview process, one of the things the CEO said was, are you willing to do anything the business requires in order to you know, for the success of the business? Are you willing to do anything?
Yep.
And I was like, yes, sir. And so they hired me for a project. And sure enough, like the day I arrived, they said, hey, the project we hired you for, I was going to be doing some signal processing algorithm stuff. The project we hired you for, we actually canned that last week. Can you work on this other thing? Can you just do web development? And I was like, oh, yeah, okay. I guess I can try and pick up some web dev stuff. Sounds kind of crap, but I can give it a crack. And so I did that for a year and a half. And the team I was in, we had some hardware products. We were deploying them onto construction sites. And so my role started to shift into kind of deploying things on site and into the product management space. And so that was I think I was there for 3 or so years until COVID hit, you know, completely disrupted supply chains. I don't know if you remember, like, hard to get hold of things. And it was like, particularly for, you know, building electronics, there were lots of, you know, you might have 80 pieces of equipment in a bill of materials for a single product. And if one thing is no longer available, then you can't make the whole thing, right? And so, yeah, that smashed us. And so we were like, basically during that period, it was so stressful. And, you know, I was a bit out of my depth with kind of, because the company had grown like a lot, and there were all these people like leaning on me, and I'm like, I've got no idea what's going on with the supply chain. Like, I can't really help you. And so that was like a pretty rough season.
How big did it get?
How big did what get?
The company?
The company. I think I was employee number 50, and a couple of years later, there might have been 100 people or so.
Wow. Okay.
And so, yeah.
Doubled.
And it also, like, the culture changed a lot over that period of time. It went from a very kind of startup, like, you rock up and each engineer is figuring out what to do. And you go, all right, this sounds like a cool feature. I'm just going to work on that. And, you know, that worked out really well. It worked really well for them. They had, you know, a small handful of like serious superstar engineers who, you know, the whole company like built off the back of like the contributions of a few people, and everyone like else kind of filled the gaps, I guess. So it got really intense. This was right at the start of COVID. And my good mate, my mate, Eric Dill is my co-founder. He called me up March 2020, and he said, hey, I've got this idea for a business. He'd been working as a broker for about 5 years at the time. I've got this idea. Brokers do this thing. All brokers do this thing. There's no great tooling. You know, we all there's a little bit of tooling that exists, but no one that does it right. And so, you know, I think there's a problem to solve there. And I was like, all right, like, I'm in. Basically, quit my job, you know, the next
second
day.
thought?
No second thought, yeah. I didn't, well, I kind of, what happened is that my wife was working and we had a baby like probably a month after that phone call. And I took I was the primary carer. My wife kept working, and, you know, I worked on Quickli whenever I wasn't like, you know, dropping off the kids or doing whatever, right? Yeah, so that's I guess that's the narrative, at least a version of the narrative that took me from, you know, being a kid and getting into starting this business. One of the big pieces of motivation, I think there were two things. One is that, you know, this job that I'd found myself in, it was not feeling right. And
what in particular wasn't feeling right about it?
Well, I don't know. My manager at the time, like, we didn't gel very well, and there was like this cultural shift in the company that like didn't really suit me. And like a lot of people, like, that didn't matter to a lot of people, but me in my role as kind of, you know, the PM for this flagship product, it was like, it was a big deal that I didn't really get on with like the like higher level management. So yeah, so that for me was like, you know, I was thinking about my next step. And the other thing was that my wife, she was making a decent salary at the time. I was making basically an entry level engineer or PM salary at the time, and we were struggling to make ends meet. We could hardly, you know, pay rent. And I was just looking at the outlook of that, just thinking, man, if something drastic doesn't change with our, you know, financial situation, then like I can't see how we can possibly afford to live, you know, near like my wife's family, because her parents help a lot with the kids. or like I can't see how we can, live anywhere that we kind of want to live. And so for me, and also like we were happy where we were, but God, I don't know if you've ever like being in a relationship when money's tight and like you're both looking at the purse strings. I mean, to be honest, my wife looks at the purse strings much more than me. I've always like never really worried about money too much, but like being in a relationship when money's tight and you have that dynamic and you have kids and you have responsibilities, like it's seriously tough, man. It's tough. Like it just kind of adds this extra layer of stress that impacts every aspect of your life.
So going into Quickli, then you had a lot to lose.
Well,
There's a lot
I
on the
didn't.
line.
Well, here's the thing, because the outlook at that point in time, I was like, well, if I just stay on the track that I am, it's things aren't going to get better much.
Bad backwards,
But
bad forwards.
I could get I think I might have been like a 90K salary. Like even if my salary went to 130 at that point in time, it's like it might have moved the needle, but it wouldn't get us out of the kind of hot water, right? And so I was like, I need to take a drastic, like the opportunity to take a drastic bet, and like pursue something big was very, very attractive. And for me, it was like, all right, look, we kind of basically pitched in all of our savings to kind of keep us afloat. And, like for me, it was like, all right, starting the business, we can be looking for a house to buy and live in, or we can take a punt on starting this business and like put our money there. And so that's the route we went down. And so, but what I did, like for me, it was if the business is a success, then, if I can pay my own wage with this business, then that's, at least I've broken even. But not only have I broken even, I've like learned a lot. I'm a better person. It's like, it's setting me up for my future, my career. And I can, like, it gives me money, freedom, and experience. And even if the thing's a complete flop, it's like, I can still make that a win. I can still turn that into, hey, like look how much I've gotten out of this. And so for me, there was really no downside. No matter how badly it went, no matter how, much money we sunk into it, there were like the downside to taking that gamble was, still better than just steady state.
What was the discussion like, if you don't mind me asking, with your partner? Was she quite like worried immediately?
Dude, no, she was right into it from the get-go. That's actually without her, like without her being like as sold as she was, it couldn't have happened.
So was it quite a quick discussion then, or it was quite drawn out? Because I think a lot of founders, especially those that are married, will have that struggle, right? Where they need to convince not only themselves that, hey, I can attack this and attack the world, but also my other half. And, and I've got to consider kids or a mortgage or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So not having a mortgage, if we had a mortgage, would have been a very different discussion. I think she was in a similar position to me. We're both kind of, because like, there's a lot of tension in a relationship when money's tight, right? And so this was for both of us like a good opportunity to, like give something a crack. And honestly, the discussion was, hey, I think this is a good idea. Eric is a really good mate. And you can frame it, you can frame the opportunity away where there's really no major downside. Like the downside is that, we need to move out of town and like live somewhere much more cheap. And so, yeah, she was right into it. And it was just a question of, hey, like, can I borrow money? Because I had never saved any money and she kind of had saved money anyway. So yes, she was happy to pitch in, a decent amount of money to kind of help keep the idea afloat.
And then moving forward, how did you go about assembling? Did you assemble a team quite quickly, or was it just you and your co-founder?
Yeah, so this was early 2020 when the idea came up, and, low rates, you probably remember low rates, like
The good
valuations up the wazoo, like the VC industry really had like pretty tight control over the narrative of what it means to be a business owner and what it means to start a tech business at the time. And I had working at Propeller, they actually shared an office with Startmate. Have you heard of Startmate?
Yes.
They're a startup accelerator. And so every couple times a year, we would have these, cohorts come through for however many weeks, and they'd all be clapping and raising money and like changing the world. I don't know how many changed the world, but that was like, for me, that was the introduction to my career, was being around these like clapping mobs of people raising money. And so when I was starting this business, it was like, all right, it's a no-brainer. Like, we got to raise money. But, you know, luckily, you know, for both of us, Eric and I, we're both builders, like through and through.
So is he quite technical as well?
No, he's not. No. So Eric had the mortgage broking background.
Yes.
And I have a engineering software product background.
So when you say builder, you mean?
So, I mean, he like active on the product front.
Okay.
And yeah, so he kept running his brokerage at the time. So the first kind of 12 months, you know, I was kind of just like, I just worked out of his office. I was building. Anyway, but like what I mean by that builder thing, like it's kind of like builder versus salesperson. I think that's what I was trying to communicate there. And, you know, so we weren't on the front foot with trying to raise money. We'll kind of like, you know, we almost procrastinated. We're like, you know what, let's just get the product to this point and then we'll start, you know, like talking to investor people and pitching. Let's just get, you know, this many users. Let's just get that many customers. Let's just get the product to here. And, you know, I think we did 12 months, you know, like just working. That point in time, at roughly the 12-month mark, we both pitched in money and hired someone. And so...
Who was the first hire, like a role-wise?
Engineer. Guy named Ryan. He was a grad engineer from UNSW. Absolute legend.
Still with you?
Still with us, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So he started and he kind of built he kept extending the core part of the platform while I did, you know, the landing page, the billing infrastructure, the team and user management, you know, the UX. And so, yeah, Ryan and I worked together getting the product to launch. And, you know, we broke even, you know, like before we knew it, at month 2 of being live.
Wow.
And at that point in time, I remember having this like really stark moment of realization, which was like, man, like, why the hell have I been obsessing and thinking about and worrying about this whole investment thing? Like this, like you can just get customers without other people's money. And so, yeah, so I guess we're pretty lucky in that regard. Also we've got a pretty small industry as well. Like, you know, you'd talk to a VC and they'd be like, oh, how many brokers are there in Australia? Or how can it internationalize? Or can you do this? Can you do that? And it's like, oh, you know, maybe there's not an opportunity for a VC to 1000x there, like to get that, you know, insane moonshot outcome. And particularly at that point in time when like 2020, 2021, when like everyone was like betting, like VCs were betting on changing the world, crypto was massive and stuff. Like it probably wasn't an easy business to invest in, and you know that suited us.
Okay. And so then you had an experience where you got your customers quite easily. So acquisition came quite quickly. What was it like the moment the first customer signed on?
The first customer, we actually started free. So we built a system where, you know, anyone could just kind of sign up and use it for free. We were pretty careful to say, hey, it's free for now. You're going to have to pay later.
Was that just to get feedback?
It was to get traction and feedback and validation. So yeah, one of the great things about the mortgage broking industry is that it's not at all a zero-sum game for brokers, right? Brokers have tight communities. They support each other. They, you know, they're all on each other's teams. It's not broker v broker. It's broker v bank, basically. And, you know, brokers are supporting the banks. And so it's not even, well, I mean, it still is broker v bank, but there's a funny dynamic there. And so what that means is that you have all of these, you know, and brokers, they all catch up for coffees. They have their little social groups and they have their Facebook groups. What it means though, if you can get one person who's really impacted by, you know, this software, that there's actually a pretty, you know, fertile market for organic growth, right? And so, you know, we did a mail out to about, I don't know, 20 or 50 people. Maybe 10 of them used it, you know, 5 of them stayed on it. 2 of them absolutely loved it. And that was like, all right, there's a little bit of validation. And we did a bigger one as well, another couple of mail outs, just like, I mean, brokers are the easiest people in the country to find. Like, it's not hard to find a broker's phone number or their email, right? And so, yeah, we just started cold emailing brokers and ended up with a small cohort of users, got a few like massive, like big fans out of that who like really saw the potential and who it really impacted. And from there, those guys just spread the word. And so, some guys posted on LinkedIn, some posted on Facebook groups. Like everyone was keen to like help, like let brokers know about, hey, there's this cool new piece of technology. And so, yeah, like that's kind of how it started.
And how'd you go about actually building the product? Was it built on like those no code builders, the drag and drop thing, like a bubble, or did you go directly to just coding it hardcore?
Just hardcore coding. Yeah. It's look, even to this day, coding is my favorite hobby in the world. And so yeah, that's just straight code, man.
Nice.
Was there a particular moment that you guys got a really big deal?
No, look, so that's one of the things about in the industry. So in the broking industry, you have banks up here, you have consumers down here, and brokers are kind of this this layer between consumers and banks. And they're also kind of relationship managers. And in between brokers and banks, so these mobs called aggregators. Aggregators help with lead gen, with compliance. They have CRMs. And so Aussie Home Loans, that's an example of an aggregator. You've probably heard of them. Who they do a lot of marketing and lead gen for their brokers. And there are other aggregators who you've never heard of, and all the brokers who operate under them have their own brands, right? And so there are all of these aggregators. And so in the early days, our hope was to kind of get some big sales over the line with these aggregators. And we had a few conversations, before we'd even monetized the product. And, we were given, loose offers that were, a tenth of what we thought we could charge brokers. And it's like, all right, well, we can take this now, or we can bet on the fact that we reckon we can get more than a tenth of your brokers over the next however many months, right? And so we just doubled down on going direct to broker. And brokerages are generally small businesses. Like most brokerages in the country are 1 or 2 man bands. And so yeah, it was a beta small b situation, not we weren't selling to enterprise.
Just for those that don't know, what is Quickli?
So Quickli solves a very simple question for mortgage brokers. So you want to buy a home, you go to your broker and you ask, hey, how much can I borrow? And the broker, before Quickli existed, what they'd have to do is they might jump onto their CRM, and there'd be a tool that tells you this number, hey, here's how much your client can borrow, but it wouldn't really be accurate. The broker wanted to know exactly how much their client would be eligible for, if they can borrow 500K or 570K. They'd have to download one of the lender's, spreadsheet serviceability calculators. These serviceability calculators, they're not public information. Generally, they're kind of, you need to be an accredited broker to get access to them. So all brokers have access to lender calculators, so that they can work out if there's a deal here or not with a particular lender.
And so am I right in thinking that they would have to fill out one of these serviceability spreadsheets per bank to evaluate?
Yeah,
Okay.
That's exactly right. And so you'd call up your broker, and at that point in time, most brokers we spoke to used CBA's spreadsheet. They had the cleanest, smoothest, easiest to understand spreadsheet, and that was just their go-to. Oh, I want to give a quick answer, I'm going to go CBA spreadsheet. And so yeah, that's how they would do it. So when they were giving people like quick quotes, because, with a broker, there's 2 parts to the relationship. First, there's like helping people answer quick questions, building trusts, helping figure out what direction they're going to go, and, like you're vibing them out, they're vibing you out. And then there's the bit where, they've committed, you've got all their documents, and you need to do this like deep research part where you're like, all right, like which lender, let's double check. Let's make sure policy is good. Let's make sure we're getting the best discount we can. And so, yeah, so it's answering that very simple question, how much can I borrow? So our platform, we just took all these calculators, digitized them, brought them into one platform. And, so a broker, instead of just saying, hey, CBA would lend you this much, they could say, they could actually review their options. They could compare rates. They could bring policy in. So, but like conceptually, like if you're looking at Quickli, it's not a great innovation. All we've really done is take existing information, package it up in a way that really works for brokers. And, one of the things that we got right that no one else really had, because, plenty of other people had tried to build a product like this before, was that our obsession around, accuracy and precision. You know, like if we're sent out, we're like, how did we round something up or did we round something down? And so, and that piece there for us, you know, was really important in helping build trust with brokers, you know, because, you know, if a broker's quoting their client, hey, you're going to be able to borrow this much, but they're actually 20 or 30K out, that can look pretty bad for the broker. So yeah, that piece where brokers can rely on us and trust us was pretty core to getting the product right.
And so it probably saves them a ton of time.
Yeah. So, you know, there are probably, when I was like doing my initial research way back in the day, I'd call brokers up. Almost every single broker I spoke to was like, that's a crap idea. Do you even understand shading? Like I'd be talking to them, hey, I'm building this product. And they'd be like, yeah, that's cool, but you don't understand how hard this is. They'd be like, yeah, okay, but you know, some lenders do 80% rental shading and other lenders do 70. It's like, yeah, I know, but work with me here. And so that, like, trying to kind of do UX workshops with brokers and trying to interview them to, like, for me, so I wasn't just trusting my business partner, it was actually pretty bloody hard. And I had to read between the lines. All of the kind of, you know, disbelief was basically them just saying, hey, I don't trust you because I've seen people try this before and I don't trust them. And so that trust deficit for me was something that we, you know, latched onto very, very early.
And how much of the broker market do you service now, roughly?
So we've probably got, it's hard to know exactly, but we've probably got, you know, 60, 70% of active brokers in the country.
Wow.
So yeah, so we kind of, it was pretty phenomenal. One of the cool things. So anyway, like the reason I stepped back just before was to describe, you know, what kind of brokers exist. There are a few different ways of classifying brokers. And just in relation to our product, you know, there are brokers who a deal would come across their desk and they would spend, you know, 5, 6, 8 hours just doing all the research for this deal. They would, you know, be digging through policy. They would be checking serviceability, that all this data entry. You know, there were brokers who, like some brokers would just blast through deals. They'd meet the person and they'd be like, all right, CBA sounds good for you. And they'd roll with CBA. And, you know, like that probably works for a lot of people, but, you know, not all, like some brokers would work like that. Other brokers wouldn't. And then there are, you know, the third category of brokers, you know, like new to industry, kind of learning the ropes, don't really like kind of need help connecting the dots and, you know, like a kind of get a lot of value from the educational component. And so one of the cool things about our platform is that, you know, we help those brokers who did hours and hours of research, we'd help them move fast. Brokers who, you know, like would like lean towards only using a small handful of lenders, you know, we actually helped them broaden the aperture of lenders that they were willing to work with. And so that was a big win for them because they could service their clients better. And the brokers who, you know, were new to industry and, or like, you know, just didn't know what they're doing, we would actually help them like get a really like solid grasp of, hey, here's what the atmosphere, ecosystem of, you know, lending options looks like, because it's all kind of visually laid out on this platform.
And so how did you go about working out the UX? You touched on it earlier, but
yeah. So the UX, we were heavily inspired by that CBA calculator, and we just kind of went off gut, mate. Like we said, hey, let's lay out all the inputs in a way that, in a structure that brokers are going to be familiar with, and, you know, have a table of results. Like it was, I mean, I don't know. We just kind of, here's what happened. I built the first version of it and I was like, it works, but it looks crap. I flicked it across to a designer mate of mine. He spent probably half an hour doing a rev, sent that back, and that's the design we still have today for that core thing. It's probably in a bit of need of a refresh, but yeah, I don't know. You just kind of have to go off gut a little bit when you're figuring out UX for, you know, a product that doesn't exist yet.
Did you go deep on learning UI, UX, or you just went, no, do you know what, this makes sense to me, I'm going to go with this?
Yeah.
Gut.
Yeah, I mean, you can only spend so much time trying to learn stuff, right? Like when you're trying to get a product to market, you need to make decisions fast. You need to, you know, if you get caught up on every little decision, then you're going to like end up spending a year on something that should take 3 months. I had one of the best pieces of advice of mine came from a CTO mate, like CTO founder mate, who said, if it works, it works. Because I was badgering him, like he was helping me out. I was badgering him. I was like, oh, what about this kind of system architecture? What about that? Or what about this trade-off? And he was like, hey, just shut up. Listen, if it works, it works. Like, just get it out the door. Like, you're trying to get customers, not build a perfect product. And so that, like, particularly with, launching an early product, like launching something, you can't stress too much. You need to, having a good intuition for product helps. And yeah, you just need to like do what has to happen to get over the line as fast as possible.
How did you go about splitting your roles in the business with your co-founder?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're probably not unique, but uncommon in that there's a fair bit of overlap in our kind of sphere of responsibilities because we're both, deep down, we're both very much builders.
Have you had to sit down and go, I do this, you do this, and at what point did you do those things?
Actually, we've sat down and had conversations like that where, maybe I'm getting a little bit spread too thin and he's like, hey, I'm going to, like run point on like most lender conversations going forward. And, with the engineering department, I kind of, that kind of just naturally fell under my, sphere. And so, yeah, it's been a pretty natural thing. Like, honestly, one of the things like, when you have a business partner, managing that relationship takes work, right? Like just like if you've got a wife and you think it's going to be, lovey-dovey and, easy the whole way through, you're going to be sorely disappointed. And so you need to work on like keeping the relationship strong, keeping line, like if something doesn't feel right, you got to bring it up. Otherwise it's going to fester and you're going to regret it and you're going to like, things are going to feel terrible. You're going to struggle to sleep. You can't let shit be unsaid. And so just like, I guess it's funny. I lean on this analogy a fair bit. Like, my relationship with my wife is similar to my relationship with Eric, except, Eric isn't quite as good looking, I think. And he's a good looking guy, but he's just not quite there, right? But yeah, you really do need to work on like keeping your relationship strong. One of the great things about Eric as a business partner, we've got a great kind of dynamic when it comes to like fleshing out product. And just like with ideas, you probably have some friends where you pitch them an idea and they're probably your smartest friends and they tell you 10 reasons why it's a bad idea. And you're like, hey, look, you're right. I'm not going to disagree, but like, I still think there's something there. And then, you might have a friend, probably less common, who just says every idea is a good idea, whatever. But I think in order, ideas, they're almost like, plans. You need to, like, if you're going to have a business partner, you need to have a good dynamic where, when you have a really new, fresh idea, they will help nurture that and kind of, they'll see the good in the idea and not all the bad, right? And so, like Eric and I, we work together really well on kind of taking little snippets of ideas and seeing the good in them. But you can't just see the good in an idea. Otherwise, it's going to end up being, like just this enormous thing with a million features and whatnot. So like the great dynamic that Eric and I have is this aspect where we nurture ideas and we attack ideas. And we both kind of have a good intuition of, all right, when's the right time to attack this idea? How close is this idea to his heart? Let's try and make the idea a little bit more objective before I start attacking it. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's a really important thing to get right with a business partner. And that's a great dynamic that Eric and I have. And so in that, like any kind of new ventures and any new products and things like that, Eric, like we work together really tightly on this kind of process of, all right, let's nurture and attack and like try and find, where there is something like a really solid nugget of potential here.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I feel like some co-founders or sort of partnerships in that regard struggle with that dynamic of, what do we run with versus what do we not run with and what is going to provide the consumer with the most value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? One of our catchphrases, like the first year and a half, Eric and I, we hadn't yet honed this art of nurturing and attacking ideas. We were in 100% nurture mode. And so we'd talk for hours about, we can do this and we can monetize that and we can build a product that does this. And we'd end up with this like big grand vision about how we're going to change the industry. And we get to the end of it after hours of talking and be like, what the fuck just happened? Like, you know what? Let's pause. Let's just build the bloody calculator. Let's just build the calculator. Throw all that in the bin. Let's just get this calculator out the door. And so we probably, like that phrase, let's build the fucking calculator, probably said that 150 times over that first year and a half. And if we didn't kind of like end those conversations, we would have been chasing endless distractions because, you know, all of these distractions, sure, there's opportunity there, but like none of them mean anything if you can't get like your core thing out the door.
If consumer won't pay for it, doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. And for us, like, you know, all of the distractions and opportunities, you know, they relied on this core idea working. They're all kind of, you know, branches that came out. So yeah, focusing on that one thing, really important.
I think you touched on something really important, and I don't know if you meant to touch on it, but it immediately popped into my mind around in the early stages, it's so important to surround yourself with people that won't give you too much positive reinforcement, but also won't give you too much negative reinforcement, because launching a business obviously very, very hard. But if you've got too many people that are like, yeah, go nuts, every feature, you might run into an issue where you've got all these cool features, but no one's paying for it. Whereas you also want negative reinforcement that's going to keep you grounded and listening to the consumer.
Yeah. Look, to be honest, we had very little positive reinforcement for that whole first year and a half. And it really, you know, it kept our, we kept our conviction. And yeah, I try to, when I'm talking to, you know, a founder who's just starting their business, I definitely try not to be too positive.
Why is that?
Just because, you know, they like, man, it's tough. You need to slog it out for a year. If I tell you something's a shit idea and you believe me, then you probably don't have the grit required to like pull something off and like have real conviction in your idea, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely, you know, if anyone has someone starting a business around them, don't be afraid to be discouraging. Because, well, I mean, you know, don't be mean, but you know, that's like, you need to be build a pretty stern stuff to take an idea to fruition, take it to market. You know, you're putting yourself out there, right? Maybe I'm thinking about it the wrong way. Maybe you should surround people with positivity. They certainly did in start, mate. There was a whole lot of clapping going on there. But yeah, we had almost no positive reinforcement like the whole way to launch until people started using it. And then, you know, it's been pretty positive since then.
I think it's complicated, right? Because sometimes those that are closest to you will have the strongest criticism, whereas those that don't know you or are distant usually are super encouraging. And I think you're spot on. You need a balance of people that are like in your corner and ready to support you because it's so freaking hard.
Yeah.
And on the same token, you also need people that are like, hey, just stay close to ground.
Yeah.
Just be sensible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you don't have to listen to those people.
No.
Like, let them say it, but you don't have to listen to them.
If only I, and I'm assuming you could probably agree, if only I'd listened to everybody along the way, I wouldn't be where I am.
Yeah, exactly.
What advice would you give to another tech founder?
Probably two things. Two things I would say, and two things I do say. One of them is kind of product focused, and is just kind of having that, you know, laser focus on, you know, what's the best first thing I can get out the door. It's really easy to be tempted and have your head in the clouds as a founder when you're chasing a big idea. So just laser focus with building product and getting, I don't like MVP because, look, MVP is great for, you know, problems that need to be solved, but, you know, like just being viable isn't always what it takes. Sometimes you need to like make something special, go a step beyond. Like maybe your product hinges on that. You know, our product hinged on being a fantastic user experience for brokers. So I guess you could say that was, you know, the minimum required, but yeah, focusing on being ruthless with not spending your time on things that don't ultimately matter. The other thing I see a bit of is people still drinking the VC Kool-Aid, thinking if you want to build technology, you need to raise money. I don't think that's true. I think when you take on external money, you're inviting a lot of kind of risk, and you're, not necessarily like increasing the chances of a good outcome for you, right? Like if you as a solo founder build a product, start making a few $100,000 a year, that's actually an insanely awesome outcome, right? But if you do that and someone's backed you and your idea doesn't have the scale, but there's something there, you kind of like you're caught in this, middle ground. So yeah, I do like it's becoming less and less of a thing, with people being able to, AI tools are helping people build fast, cheap. So that's pretty phenomenal. But yeah, they're the two things I see. People thinking that they need money if they're going to build technology, and people thinking that and people not being, tightly focused enough on, the outcome they're chasing. One thing I will say for taking on investment money is what's cool about it is that it de-risks entrepreneurship. So, if you've got an idea and, you can convince someone to fund it, that's like you've, at least as far as, your social, circle might be concerned, like that's a win on the board. You've done something cool, like convincing someone to fund your idea is, that's a cool thing to do. If you just do it yourself, launch it and it's a flop, that's not a cool thing to do. And so you definitely take on not just more kind of financial risk, but more social risk, I guess, by like chasing an idea without, getting, financial backing before going live. And so, yeah, that's something, but, look, it's probably easy for me to say because it's the path we went down and it worked for us. But yeah, they're the two things.
How big is Quickli now, team member wise?
Look,
roughly?
I think we've got about 50 people.
How have you gone about hiring talent?
Yeah, hiring's hard, especially hiring for roles that you like don't have a really firm grasp of yourself.
Why is that?
Just because, it's hard to, when you're in a sphere that you're unfamiliar with, it's kind of hard to tell the wheat from the chaff. So for example, we just hired a couple of like gun sales, like head of sales, head of partnerships. They both started probably 3 weeks ago now, and they're both absolutely on fire. I think we made a really good decision there. But the thing is that it was a hard decision to make, and it took kind of, like dozens of interviews to kind of hone in on, all right, is this the right person for us?
What are you looking for in the right person? Like, is there something specific?
Well, I mean, look, it depends on the role. Look, when it's easy to hire when you have a really concrete deficit and you're like, all right, we need a designer or we need, another engineer. When you're hiring someone into kind of the higher levels, you're like, there's this added part where it's like, all right, I need to be able to gel with this person. We need to have a good working dynamic because there's going to be a lot of communication here. And so, yeah, you need to like, obviously like test competency and, whether it's appropriate for the role, but there's definitely this added aspect where, we need to be able to gel with this person and like have really, really clear lines of communication. So, and then from there, like, hopefully if you're surrounded by like people, you have good communications with, anyone working under them, it's, I don't know, you just need to find the right people. So there are two, so hiring in the Philippines, we've got about 10 Philippines-based engineers, 10 Sydney-based engineers.
What made you decide to offshore?
Yeah, good question. So offshoring, highly recommend it. Philippines is awesome. So the reason we went to the Philippines, I mean, the reason you think about offshoring is that, people are cheap, like labor is cheaper in other countries, right? The downside of offshoring is language and cultural barriers. And the Philippines is great for us. So we've got a team of probably 10 or so people in the Philippines who have, they might be loan processors. They've worked with brokers before. They understand the industry. They understand the product. So we've got a team of people there who their sole job is keeping the platform up to date. So they're researching policy. If there's a change, they bake it into our system. They're testing things. If a customer says, hey, something doesn't look right, they're investigating it. And so those people are just like 100% of their time is focused on like keeping the product up to date. And Philippines, like the broking and banking industry does a lot of outsourcing to the Philippines. And so it's easy to find these people in the Philippines. So it was a no-brainer for us to build that team in the Philippines. And then with the engineering team, it was like, all right, we can hire engineers in other countries anywhere, but let's just go with the ones where they're going to be able to talk to each other more easily, right? So that's why we built our engineering team there. I mean, but we do have a hybrid. So it's half the team's based in Sydney and half the engineering team is there. So I do think it's important to have a lot of, like, to be in office, to have, like clear, like just informal chats, designers to be co-located with engineers, product to be chatting to engineers, like having them in the same room is very important.
Why?
Just because like the amount of collaboration it takes to get a product right. So when I'm building a product, I can be the engineer, the product person. Like I've demoed Quickli that many times. Like I kind of get the whole thing. So I can do these like super fast feedback loops in my head building product. Oh, that doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel right. Boom, 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 boom. But when you start to build a team, and it's going to be like that for many kind of founding engineers, right? Because they've just been in it from day one. They understand the whole thing. But once your team starts to scale, like your engineers don't necessarily understand, like every engineer can't understand every aspect of the product. It kind of becomes too big. And so I think in order to get, and there's often a lot of trade-offs when you're building things that cross both design and engineering. So you really want your product and design and engineering to kind of have their heads together. And just like if they're co-located, if they hang out with each other, if they can talk easily and freely, and it's not a meeting, it's just I walk up to your desk, like that is the best way to get these tight feedback loops on, just like making the right decisions. And like those tight feedback loops on product decision making is, that's where velocity comes from. So that's my take on why I think the office thing is so important. Another thing that we've done, that we've had a few guys who joined the team, they comment on this, is how our Philippines team, it's like they're actually like really a core part of the team. It's not us and them so much. They're not at all second-class citizens, right? Like they are, leading feature builds. They're like working really tightly with the team, and we do our best, in like when we're going to be working on a feature, we want to have an offshore guy, an onshore guy, just to get, like to keep the dynamic tight. Because I've seen a bunch of times, I've seen and heard, there being, hey, we're the onshore team, we do this, and there's the offshore team, they do that. You only need like one miscommunication for a whole team to go off the rails there, right? Whenever you're working with someone from a non-English speaking, like ESL, product miscommunications are so much easier. Look, to be honest, like we built the team and structured all of this, and we didn't do like the whole rationale and stuff I'm explaining here. It's not, we didn't think about it and decide up front. We just kind of built the team and started doing what felt right. And like, I'm kind of reflecting on, hey, this actually is working really well. Why is that? And so like, how do we make sure it stays right? We just kind of keep doing what we initially did that worked well, which is, making sure that our, feature build teams are like structured in a way that gets like the teams collaborating.
And how did you decide, or do you have a process for deciding when you need your next staff member or team member?
We always need our next team member.
But how do you balance like the finance side of it? Do we want to actually spend on it versus is there value in it versus the time commitment to train and embed?
So look, we got a few different teams, right? So hiring into our, QA team, it's just like their responsibilities are always expanding. We're always adding features. They need to be across more stuff. When they're all getting stressed out, we're like, all right, let's beef out that team a bit. With engineering, where we've always had a fairly regular cadence of like, all right, let's hire more people into the team. So like,
So it's not necessarily based on a specific metric, but it's based on, I can see that the team just generally is operating at 100% and it's probably time to alleviate a bit of stress.
Well, it kind of, it has to do with our, like we could have grown the team much faster than we have. But a lot of the product stuff's been driven by Eric and I. And so we become the bottleneck. And so right now, we're like making a pretty significant effort to kind of level up our like product and design function that doesn't rely so much on us, to make us less the bottleneck with engineering, right? So
How'd you realize that you were the bottleneck?
It's pretty fucking obvious when you're the bottleneck, mate. Like people, you are the bottleneck when there are unread messages that you don't have time to, give attention to. Yeah, you've been a bottleneck before, surely, right? And
many times.
And bottlenecking yourself, it's never a fast thing, right? Like you need to really build trust in the people. You can't just hand stuff off and expect them to succeed. I've done that many times and it's gone balls up. I think people need training, they need hand holding. Like you need to really invest in getting people like up to the point where you can rely on them, right? So yeah, that kind of, dependability, like excellence in their craft and, like I like this phrase, professional trust, right? Like if I can hand you something, if I can like flick this onto you and it can leave my mind, like if it hovers in the back of my mind, I don't have this like deep kind of professional trust in you. If when I hand it off to you, it can leave my mind, that is phenomenal, right? So that's kind of where you need to get to everyone who reports to you. And
I think you've actually understated that, because I think that's quite important, especially in an early stage business. I like the way that you call it professional trust, but I think it's huge, is knowing that you can hand something off to a team member and just knowing mentally I can close this out. It is not coming back.
Yeah. Because that's the, that's like one of the main taxes on you as a, business owner, right? Is that you have like all of this stuff occupying your mind. And like, how can you be effective in like your decision making in this, like these other spheres when you're when you're preoccupied with all this stuff? And I mean, like, you're always gonna, like, I want to be across, it's good to be across everything, but, being across things where you have, deep trust in the people to execute appropriately, that's kind of where you need to get to. And you don't need to get there straight away. We're not there. Like, we're not there with everyone. There's always, things, not working out. But, when you find people who you can, there's a small handful of people in the organization who always impress me with their output. And, and they're the people who I'm really like, I'm helping them grow and I'm giving them more and they're taking it on and, doing really well. So you definitely do need a positive feedback loop for people who perform there as well.
Switching gears a little bit, there's obviously huge hype around AI at the moment. Where do you see that fitting in? Is it something you guys are exploring? And just generally, where do you see that fitting in?
I love this. I love that you brought this up. AI is a funny one, man. It has been the talk of town for 2 years, right? The 2 and a bit years. It's been AI. It's going to change the world. It's the industrial revolution on steroids, and like all these jobs are going to be lost. We've always been big believers in AI to be, massively disruptive in many industries, including our own. Not necessarily disruptive, not necessarily to the participants of an industry, but disruptive to, the processes of the participants within an industry. So, there's all kinds of things that you can kind of chain together with AI agents and, various things like that. We've spent, a bunch of time and energy and resources in investing in trying to get AI products to market. Man, one of the problems is that with broking, look, here's where AI goes really, really well when you're looking for help, when you want something, like you want something summarized or clarified or expanded upon, or a creative partner, or to workshop ideas, or, there's some like sphere where you're not familiar with. Like, it's like AI for me, it's like it's leverage for my brain, right? Like it helps me think better and faster and like all that kind of stuff. So, but when I want like a concrete, true outcome or answer, it often, misses the mark. And so when I'm working, this is specifically generative AI, right? Not, like statistical ML or anything like that. So with generative AI, like all of our efforts to bring it in to Quickli, it's been like, yeah, great. This is a true answer sometimes, but painfully misleading in subtle ways other times. And so we've always, we've built something and been like, oh yeah, we've kind of missed the mark there, right? And so, yeah, it's our kind of our holistic AI strategy as a company it's definitely evolved a lot as we've kind of faced the realities of how reliable AI can be, you know? And we've also kind of gone from let's make like an AI god that does all this stuff, you know, we've like initially we were thinking, and there were probably a lot of people thinking like really big picture with AI stuff, but kind of what we're trying to do now is we're trying to go, you know what, are there any little wins with AI? Can we make this small thing a little bit better? Can we make that a thing that, you know, where if it, you know, hallucinates, or I mean, I don't like how people bang on about hallucination, but if it's incorrect or if it, you know, misinterprets something, what's the outcome of that? If it's like bad and misleading, then that kind of becomes a feature category that we don't want to touch. If it's just going to be, you know, they need to clarify something, then that's kind of landing on our plate right now of, you know, oh, that's actually a feature that could be cool. So we are next week going to be doing a company-wide AI hackathon where every engineer is like, all right, do the coolest AI shit you can think of. But what we're going to do for kind of, you know, product strategy stuff, we've just got a few kind of small enhancements or kind of add-ons. It's like, hey, we have this really tightly scoped AI feature that's going to allow you to kind of plug into the system from a different angle. And if if it doesn't hit the mark, it's not the end of the world because you'll know. Anyway, so like fleshing out an AI product strategy, we're pretty grateful that we didn't go too hard too soon on it, because you look at like so many of these mobs like Intercom, Notion, like so many have, you know, the big AI thing probably like about a year ago now. They're all launching these big AI things and they're all flops. Like none of the product enhancement from AI like meant anything to anyone. You know, the only really massively successful AI product is still just ChatGPT, right? And so yeah, the AI is going to be really big in the future, but you know,
it's not there yet.
It's not there yet. Yeah, and it's not there yet because probably not because of the underlying technology. Like the technology is where it needs to be, but you know, like shaping a product that leverages AI in a meaningful way and that plugs into your system, particularly for us because we're, you know, B2B SaaS. Yeah, like figuring out how it fits in the product strategy without being the whole product strategy is something that's not too easy to get right.
It's insightful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Angus, is there anyone you feel like you couldn't have done all of this without?
There are 3 people who without their complete buy-in, it wouldn't have happened. The first one is Eric. Obviously, like he was my co-founder, and good mate. Second one's my wife. She was bought into, I mean, she's, you know, she's like the idea aside, she was bought into me like pursuing something that had potential. And the last one was our first hire, Ryan. Like we got really lucky with him. If we'd hired someone slightly less dedicated, slightly less proficient, or kind of switched on, like it would have taken us much longer to get a solid product to market. And you know, we entered the market with solid timing. You know, like it was late 21, and the whole kind of mortgage industry was changing on a dime, you know, from quarter to quarter. Like all lenders would be pursuing this strategy, and then, you know, something else happens or there's a rate hike or whatever, and lenders changing policy, and you know, there was a lot around that time for brokers to be across many changes, and we kind of came in at a really good time where we're able to be that kind of medium of communication to brokers. Actually, you know what? There's probably one extra person in our Philippines team. Her name's Jiffy. So she reached out to Eric, you know, just cold reach out, say, hey, you looking for work? Quickli looks pretty cool. And so she's been a phenomenal kind of just go-to person for running that whole arm of the business. So yeah, definitely an enabler.
Yeah, I think the first few hires make a huge difference on how business evolves, but also how quickly it evolves.
Yeah. And look, I think, you know, we kind of, our engineering hiring strategy in the early days was, we definitely hired fairly junior. Like we're leveling up our engineering department now. And so, yeah, like, but that's kind of, you know, season 2 of hiring. You know, season 1 is like getting your product out the door and getting a business viable. Yeah.
Angus, thank you so much for coming on.
All right. Cheers, Tate.